Hey everyone, welcome to Skein Spider and to the fourth and final part of the Bluey pattern. If you haven't seen parts 1 to 3, go check those out first. If you have, grab your hooks and let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is sew the pupil onto the eye. You can place it wherever you think looks best. I'm going to place it about 2 rounds in from the side here and closer to the top than to the bottom. The only thing you really need to remember is the pupil should be longer than it is wider. So where we did those 3 increases together in the last round, they should be at the top and the bottom. Pin them in place and then go ahead and sew them on. When you're finished, you're just going to pass your needle through to the back of the eye and either weave in or tie off your end. Repeat the process on the second eye and then we're going to move on to the ears. To prepare the ears, you're going to pin the inner ear to the outer ear. The bottom row of the inner ear is going to be pinned in place 2 rows up from the bottom of the outer ear. So pin that in place, and when you've got that all pinned down, go ahead and sew that on too. When you've finished sewing, we're just going to insert our needle through to the middle of the ear. Pull the rest of your yarn through. Then either weave the tail end in or tie it off to secure it. The first piece we're going to attach to the body is going to be the muzzle piece. But before we do that, we need to add some stuffing. We're not going to stuff the muzzle all the way to the top. We're going to do a little bit. Then we're going to sew it on for 3/4 and then add some more stuffing. It just makes stuffing these open pieces a little bit easier to do it like that. So once you have a little bit of stuffing in the muzzle, we're going to place it on the body. First, make sure you have your muzzle up the right way. The 2 side panels should be pointing down and out. So like this, we don't want it up this way. Once you're sure it's in the right position, we're actually going to fold these side panels in and put some pins in them to hold them in place, because we're not sewing those on just yet. You're going to line up the top of the blue part of the muzzle here with the last color change row we did. So where the dark blue ends, that's where we want to line the top up with, but we also want to center it in between the blue forehead stripe here. Before you start sewing, just take out the pins keeping the side panels up and pull them down, just to make sure the piece is actually centered. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to pin those back up. When they're out of the way, we're going to begin sewing on the muzzle. We're going to sew for about 3/4 of the way around, stop there, add some more stuffing, and then finish sewing. When you're finished sewing, just weave the tail end in through the body to secure it. And then what we're going to do is unpin the side panels. And then we're going to lay them flat, both against the side of the muzzle here and on the body itself. You want to make sure the bottom of each of the panels lines up on the same round or the space between the rounds. It doesn't matter which number exactly, but just make sure they're the same. So if I pin this one here, I'm just going to put a little marker in to know that's this round I'm working into, and then I can pin the second one in that same round. Once you've pinned the sides down, also pin across the top. And when it's pinned, we're just going to sew that on too. Next up is the nose. We're just going to place that on the end of the muzzle. The tip of the nose is going to line up with round 1. And we're just going to pin that in place. Then just make sure it's on straight and centered, and add a couple more pins. And when that's done, we're going to do some more sewing. The next parts we're going to sew on are going to be the eyes. We're going to pin the tops in between rounds 18 and 19. So start at round 1 and just count your rounds out until you reach round 18, and then between it and round 19 place a pin. While the tops sit between rounds 18 and 19, the sides of the eye are going to be back about 1 or 2 stitches from the muzzle. So pin your eyes in place, and then when that's done, we're going to sew those on too. Next up we have the eyebrows. There's no particular round that you need to pin these to, it's really just down to personal preference. I like to have them from the center, angled downwards out over the eye. But like I said, it's personal preference, so you can place them wherever you like. Go ahead and pin them in place, and then we're going to sew them on. The eyebrows are slightly different from the rest of the features in that there's no open end to work into. With the eyes, for example, we had the exposed V of our stitches to work into, but we don't have that here. So instead what we're going to do is work into the space in between the rounds to sew the eyebrows on. So in here, for example, we're going to sew into those spaces instead of where the V's would have been in an open piece. After the eyebrows, we're going to sew on the belly patch. You're going to center it in between the muzzle and place the top of it about 2 or 3 rows down from it. Go ahead and pin that in place, and then we're going to sew that on too. Next up is the ears. We're going to pin the tops between rounds 3 and 4, that's this guide marker here, and the bottoms between rounds 19 and 20. You're also going to place the ears on the head just back from round 1 here. So you can see round 1 ends there, and I've set the ears just behind it. Pin your ears in place and then sew those on. After you've done the ears, we're going to sew the arms on next. We're going to place the arms between rounds 44 and 45 of the body here. And there's two ways you can do this. You can either put the arms on like so and have them sticking out from the body, or you can do it the way I've done it and squash the top flat like this. And then you're just going to pin that squashed part to the body and sew it on in a straight line. So sew it on either in a circle or squash it flat and sew it on straight. We're going to attach the tail next. The first thing that you need to do is make sure that the tail is up the right way. So if you have a look at the tail from the side, so this is the side view here, you'll see there's like two little bumps on this side here, 1 and 2, and then a more pronounced bump on the top. This top bump here, where there's only one, is going to be the top of the tail. So if I put it on the body like this, that one pronounced bump is on the top here. You're going to pin the tail between rounds 60 and 61. I've already got my guide pin in here, as you can see. And you're going to center it in between the ears at the top of the head. And once again, just make sure that that one more pronounced bump is at the top of the tail. When you've got the tail pinned in the correct spot, go ahead and sew that on. When it comes to the spots, the exact placement doesn't really matter too much, but I've just put the large one next to the tail, off to the side a little bit, the smallest above the tail here, and the medium one above both, sort of in between the two. But once again, the exact placement doesn't really matter as long as you have the 3 spots on the back, slightly more over to the right side of the body here, you're good to go. Pin those down, and we're going to sew those all on as well. We're almost done now. All we need to do is sew on the legs. Now the legs can be sewed on in one of 2 positions. You can put them down the bottom to have a standing Bluey, or you could have it, it's working very well, at the front if you want Bluey to sit down. So decide where you want to place the legs, then you're going to pin them, sew them on for about 3/4 and then add some extra stuffing if you need to at the top, and then finish sewing. Our final step before completing our Blueys is going to be to add the details. We're going to shape the paws and add a smile. To shape the paws, the first thing you're going to do is take a pin and mark out the center of the paw here, like I've done. Just move Bluey up a bit. Bluey's a bit big and my workspace is a little bit small. Okay, so as you can see, I've marked out the center here. And then what you're going to do is from this center point, or roughly where the center point is between round 6 and 7, is count out about 4 stitches, 3 or 4 stitches, and place a pin in that last stitch. Whether that's 3 or 4, that's up to you. And do that for both sides. We're going to do the same thing at the top, and each pin, so the left hand side and the right hand side, those pins should be roughly in line. When you have the 4 pins on the outside marked, you can take this center pin out, we don't need that anymore. Next step is to thread your needle with some dark blue yarn, and then choose a point at the bottom of the foot, doesn't really matter where, to go into. We're first going to go into the stitch marked by the bottom left pin, And you're going to pull that yarn through until you've got a little bit of a tail left on the outside. This just needs to be long enough that you can knot it off at the end. From there, take that pin out. We're going to go to the top left pin. And then go straight through that stitch, down and out of the bottom right pin. Make sure your yarn's in a nice straight line, and then when it is, you're going to pull firmly on the end that's on the end that's attached to your needle, while also keeping a firm hold on the tail here so it doesn't pull through. As you pull, you'll see the paw shapes. The more firmly you pull, the more defined the shape of the paw is going to be. I'm going to leave it about like this. I don't want the shape to be too distinct. After you've done that bit, we're going to go straight up into the top right pin here. And then from there, back out of the bottom right. And then we're going to do the same thing. Make sure the yarn's nice and straight. And then pull firmly. This time you just want to make sure that the second part we did is roughly the same shape as the first part. So if you pulled this first, if you pull this first part really firmly, you want to do the same to the second part. But if you only pulled lightly, again, you want to do the same so they look symmetrical. Once that's done, go back into the same stitch, and then we're going to go out the original stitch we went into. Pull firmly on your yarn again if that happened to loosen up a little bit. And when that's done, you're just going to tie off the end to secure it. Snip off the excess. Take your crochet hook and insert it into the foot. Go up through the stitch where the knot is, and then just pull it back into the body to hide it. And that is the feet all done. Our last step is going to be to make the smile. We're going to use the same technique we did for the paws. So thread your needle with some black yarn, mark out where you want the smile to be, and just go into a stitch, any stitch on the body. And then I'm going to go up through the center marker. Make sure you leave that tail on the outside. Then I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to go to one of the outside markers, back to the center, and pull firmly so the yarn lays flat. Then out to the second marker and back to the center again. Oops. Pull firmly. And from there, I just want to go straight across the mouth and go into the center marker on the other side. And then out one of the side markers. Pull firmly into the center and then straight to the second outside marker. Back to the center, and then from there I'm going to weave my way down till I get to the original stitch that we worked into. Then you're just going to tie that off and pull the knot back into the body with your crochet hook. And that's Bluey all finished. I hope you enjoyed this pattern. If you did, consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all next week with some Halloween patterns.